Hi everybody, it's week 5, time for your English 101 overview. What are we doing this week? Here's a screenshot of both week 5 and week 6. So we're in week 5 now. I wanted to give you an overview of the timeline for this next assignment that's coming up. You really have to hit the ground running with this one because the preliminary draft, your rough draft of this will be due next week on Wednesday. So that means you really have to dive into this. Hopefully last week you had a chance to look at the instructions, maybe even read the articles. I hope you did. If not, you just need to get busy with that this week. So you have quite a bit of reading in your textbook. This is really important. It really captures all of the main points of what you need to do for this assignment, what skills you're working with. Also has some great questions that you can follow while you put together your rough draft. You also have a 2-part discussion post, and I'll go over that in just a minute. All right, let's look at Project 2. I have a feeling some of you may still have a few questions about what it is you're doing. So what we're doing in this class is we're really building on your skills, your critical thinking and writing skills. For project number 1, you dipped your toe into the skill of analysis. And we talked about how that is looking at the smaller pieces of something and looking at them individually to see, kind of what patterns exist. And so you did that for the visual, the image that you analyzed. You looked at the fonts, the color, the format, all of that stuff. Okay, that was analysis. Now we're adding another tool to your toolbox, which is synthesis. So this assignment is asking you to do both of those things, analysis and synthesis. For this paper, you will analyze the information from 3 sources that relate to one another in meaningful ways. And you get to figure out what those ways are, right? The preliminary goal of this paper is to synthesize the material from 3 different sources to clearly explain your main takeaway or your focus on the topic of student loan debt. So here are some questions that you can be thinking about as you're beginning to put together your rough draft. How do these articles and videos and books, whatever you chose to work with, support each other on your chosen focus? In what areas do they disagree or offer a different perspective? Why is this conversation important? I think most of us would agree that the topic of student loans is pretty important. I mean, I have to be honest with you. My husband and I still have student loans from going to grad school. And frankly, I'm already thinking about retirement and I am still paying off student loans. So trust me, I feel your pain when it comes to this topic. That last one, how do you react to the conversation? So this is a paper that you can definitely include your personal experience and your viewpoints. Now that's not the main focus of this paper, but it can certainly be a part of it because you can enter into the conversation. You'll also be creating a thesis statement for this paper that informs your audience of your focus and how these sources talk to each other. Okay, so let me explain that in a little more detail. Here are the 3 articles that you're working with. These were listed in last week's module. All 3 of them have to do with some aspect of student loan debt. You're supposed to read all 3 of them and then choose 2 that you would like to work with for this project. Then you're going to choose another source of your own individual choosing. It can be another article, it could be a book, could be a video, could be a TED Talk, but anything that actually enters into the conversation or gives more information about the focus that you are choosing to work with these sources. I'll explain that a little bit better in a following slide. So let's talk about this skill of analysis. You've already done it. You actually all are very, very good at it because you use it in your everyday lives. But let's see if we can't nail down the definition just a little bit more clearly when we're talking about academic research. It's a type of primary research that involves identifying and interpreting patterns in data, classifying those patterns, and then generalizing the results. So we're looking at the smaller elements. we're asking ourselves, how do these fit together? What kind of bigger picture do these indicate or suggest? And then what can I say about that? What conclusion can I come to? It's useful, it's crucial when we're looking at things like actions, events, occurrences in different texts, media, publications. And we say that, we really mean, information, facts, figures, those sorts of things. Could even be, opinions, if we're talking about the opinions of an established expert in this particular field. Analysis can be done on published documents or performed on raw data that you have collected. So let's say you decided to prepare a survey and ask all of your classmates if they would fill out this survey. And I have to tell you, if you want to do that for this assignment, I would think that would be awesome. I've suggested it a lot of times, and honestly, I've never had anybody take me up on it. But that would be tremendous data. Create a survey about people's results, their feelings, their attitudes, the consequences of student loan debt, and, send it to 50 of your closest friends and see what they say. So that would be the idea of raw data that you collect, but then you have to analyze to see what the results are. What are the conclusions? What patterns do you see? This is a quote from your book. When you analyze, you determine how a text, an object, or a body of data is structured or organized. You often assess its effectiveness or validity. Validity means how true is it? You can also think of things like credibility, reliability, right? Because you don't want to analyze data that is wrong, that hasn't been put through the peer review process or published by a reputable source. So that's also an aspect of this. Here are some methods for conducting analysis. You find and collect your documents. That's what you're in the process of doing right now. You're specifying criteria or patterns that you are looking for. You are analyzing documents for patterns, noting the number of occurrences or other factors. That second bullet point is crucial for this assignment, and I have to tell you, it's one that an awful lot of you are going to miss. Well, I hope not. But when you are looking at these sources, you are not just summarizing the information. You're not saying, Article 1 is blah, 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 and it says blah, blah, blah. Article 2 says blah, blah, blah. There are so many aspects to student loan debt. I mean, if you just stopped and thought about it, there are so many things. Our articles talk about the mental health that people experience as a result of student loan debt, deferring those important benchmarks of impending adulthood like marriage and children and home ownership. There's race involved. All right, you're not going to write a paper that looks at all of those. As you read your sources, you're going to pick out one of those to focus on, right? And then when you find your third source, it's going to be a source that speaks to that focus that you have chosen. So here are just some examples of analysis in action. Recording commercials on 3 major television networks and analyzing race and gender within the commercials to discover some conclusion. Analyzing the historical trends in public laws by looking at the records at a local courthouse. Analyzing topics of discussion in chat rooms for patterns based on gender and age. You will be analyzing the information that is related to the focus that you've chosen from the 3 sources that you end up working with. All right, that is analysis. I hope we're all on the same page now, have a pretty good understanding of what that skill is. So what is synthesis? Well, if analysis is teasing something apart into smaller pieces and looking at each individual piece, then synthesis is pulling it all back together again but in a new and different and original way. So when you are performing synthesis, you're looking at all these patterns, this data that you have collected, and then you're asking yourself, what does this mean? So you're looking for areas where your sources agree or disagree, and you're asking yourself, why? Now, why would this source seem to think that this is a positive thing, but here's another source that says, no, that's a negative thing. Now you're going to have to do a little more digging, a little more thinking to see if you can't figure out what the relationship between those might be. You're looking for broader conclusions about your topic based on what your sources say. Writing a research paper usually requires synthesizing the available sources in order to provide new insight or different perspective into your particular topic. Now, a lot of you may be really familiar with a quote research paper where you just collect a whole bunch of data, the GDP of Brazil, and you just kind of list it in some sort of organized way, and voila, there's your research paper. That's not what we're doing here. You are actually seeing if you can't glean some kind of maybe even original insight by looking at what different writers say about this topic and then combining it with your own experience. So keep that in the back of your mind. All right. So what sorts of things could you focus on for your analysis and synthesis? Well, these are just some things that I just kind of pulled out of the air. This is not an exhaustive list by any means. If you want to use one of these, go for it. But if you want to come up with something different, that's perfectly fine too. So your paper could focus on what are some of the mental health problems associated with student loans or student loan debt? What are the major life benchmarks that some people may put off if they have student loan debt? And how does this ultimately affect the American economy? What are the emotional, mental, and physical effects on students returning to their parents' home to live because they have student loan debt? Are there correlations between student loan debt and suicide? Correlation means that there is a statistical relationship. If we say something is a positive correlation, that means that when one thing goes up, another thing goes up. So a positive correlation between student loan debt and suicide would be perhaps the more money that a student has to borrow in order to pay for school, the higher the likelihood of suicide. Now, I don't know if that's true, so do not use my words as evidence in your paper. I'm just trying to illustrate what a positive correlation would be. And of course, when we're talking about suicide, there's nothing positive about it. But I have had people confused when they read those words in a paper that there's a positive correlation, and they immediately think that the paper is saying that there's something really good about this. No, it just is referring to this connection or this correlation between these two facts or data sets. How does the mental health of American students with student loan debt compare to students in other countries that pay for their tertiary education? Tertiary meaning university or college. Is there a positive correlation between incurring student loan debt and career success or earnings later in life? So in other words, is there maybe a connection between the more money you borrow and the more money you make down the road? I have no idea. I haven't done that research, but you might want to. So these are just a few examples of things that you could look at. Well, I'm sorry I had to rush through that. I have to keep this under 15 minutes in order to post it on YouTube. So anyway, remember you have a 2-part discussion post. I'll leave that up to you to read the instructions. Remember, if you have any questions about this assignment, please join me for office hours Monday between 11 and 12, where I can answer your questions quickly. You can also post questions in the Ask the Instructor discussion forum or contact me via the inbox on Canvas and my university email. All right, that's it. Have a wonderful week, and I'll talk to you later.